Guys, welcome back to another episode of Rennch. On today's show, we are beginning the fabrication to install the water cooling system in this 1969 Porsche 911 to get it ready for the Subaru EZ30r Flat Six swap. Hi and welcome back. If you caught the last bombshell of an episode, you'll now know that I'm installing a Subaru EZ30r Flat Six into this 1969 911, and I have to now install the cooling system. In my hand right here is a CSF drag radiator. This is a lovely piece of kit. I've had this thing modified a little bit to cut the corners so it would fit on the Blasphemy build, but I'm now going to fit it here on the gray Ghost. One of the first things I noticed when I kind of tried to do a bit of a fit up was the battery boxes are in the way. Now this is an early 911, and a lot of the early 911s actually came with two 6-volt batteries. Some of them came with 12 volt as they went further into the 70s, but eventually they got rid of the battery boxes, which were sort of sticking out into the fender wells because they wanted to install Porsche oil coolers. So basically I'm just taking the oil cooler concept and making it a water cooler concept. And that's something that's particularly interesting about this whole thing. I'm basically using the Porsche factory routing for these radiators that we're sending oil versus water. So it's not that different, but custom bracketry, etc., etc. Now I wish these radiators came in a smaller form factor because I could just use them for my kits and everything would be great. Unfortunately, they are a little too wide, but because this car has RSR fenders and flares, I can actually fit these things under the fenders. So I've got to trim the fiberglass. I've got some fiberglass front fenders on this thing, but I have to get rid of the battery boxes so I get some nice airflow into this radiator. I've already cut the passenger side battery box out. That was the easy one. That's the one that has no wiring. It's not right next to the fuse panel, etc., etc. But now I have to tackle the one that is a little more complicated. So I think what I'm going to do is get the cut at least started with my angle grinder as much as I can. Then I'm going to go in with an air saw because it's a lot more precise and just try to see if I can just cut around and get this thing detached. All right, I've got this thing relatively cleared out now. And I'm going to do my best to obviously avoid all these wires, especially on this end. So I'm going to go in the other side with the angle grinder and then, I don't know, do as much as I can from the outside and then try to run this air saw and see if I can cut this thing out. All right, got the hard one out. Only one casualty, which was this wire. So I will definitely replace this wire before I weld this panel back in. And that's going to be my plan. I'm going to clean these edges up, try to square them as much as I can, and then weld panels in. But before I do that, I want to do a little test fit of the radiator. And to test fit the radiator, I need to actually shave down. These are fiberglass, if you guys don't know. My front fenders are fiberglass in this car. So I need to shave like a little notch on the underside here so the width of the radiator can fit where it needs to and I can lay it correctly. So I'm going to do that first, try to get some idea of how to notch this. It might end up being quite thin on this side, but probably end up taking, I don't know, like that much out. Leave like 3/8 of an inch around the edge, except for here where I've got it mounted. So I'll probably kind of cut this way and just cut a little scoop out here so I can see if these things will fit. All right, quick test fit. We are definitely in the ballpark. Now this wheel is going to go up a few inches. I think it tucks just underneath, so it's a couple inches up. Got a little bit of clearance here, but I actually had a thought. I think there's a bracket right here that's kind of preventing the radiator from going all the way back where I want it. So I might have to figure out something for this headlight. I don't know what it is yet, but we'll get there. But I had a thought. Since these things are already out, I may actually end up having somebody change the port from this side to this side, and then just literally running my connecting hose right through here. Instead of having to deal with all the stuff up front, I can have it run right through there with a grommet, and it'll be super clean. So I think I'm going to explore that, and then I, again, have to figure something out for this little bracket, but we are definitely in the ballpark. I think this is going to work. I also should be able to put the whole thing a lot lower, pull it down a couple of inches until it's about here. That'll give me a little bit more airflow. I may actually end up doing something with my bumper here as well, where I put some holes and a grill just to get some air in the front, but I haven't quite figured that out. So one of the big challenges of these engines is not only getting the coolant out of the engine and combined, because we're going into one radiator, but to do it in a nice clean way that looks really good. And when someone pops your hood, they're like, wow, that's really cool. And that is where AJ Moulis comes in. He's a fellow Subaru Flat Six nerd and has developed some beautiful press fit AN fittings for the two main outlet ports of the EZ30R. Do you want to tell us really quick about them?
Yeah, so basically we made a 16 AN press in fitting right here. So this is where it's going to press into the block, and we have two different lengths depending on your setup.
So you really wanted this for your own car. He's got this bitchin' Legacy out there that has the same engine, but it's all dorked up and beautiful, and he's a killer welder, so he's done some amazing work. You decided to make these because A, it's a lot easier to connect all the tubing and hoses, and you don't have to worry about hose clamps and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But you also have a bit of an aesthetic thing for your motor as well, right?
So what we wanted to do is come up with a solution to be able to utilize AN fittings for the radiator hoses. And
plus they look way cooler.
Oh, definitely.
Don't they, you know?
Definitely. So this was our solution. It uses 16 AN press-in aluminum fitting. It's hard anodized black, so it'll look really clean, better than hose clamps.
Yeah. One thing you guys can't tell right now is that this is ice cold. It's been sitting on ice for hours because it obviously shrinks it a little bit. It's easier to press in. And then we sometimes have to heat the outer housing to get it to flush in. You put a bit of Loctite on here just to make sure it's solid. If you guys are interested in any, his Instagram is AJ's Garage 5. I've got it right here on screen. Come check them out. They're really, really beautiful. And you want them, he'll make them. We've managed to get the press-in bungs out by heating up the housing here, putting some vice grips on, and then tapping them out. And I say tapping, but I got just the work out of my life getting them out. Now we'll clean up with some Scotch-Brite, and we should be good to go for install.
Okay. There it is.
Super clean. Just so you guys can see the contrast here, this is the factory gross one. And then this is this lovely piece of kit. Come on, who wouldn't want this? Anyway, he's got the two different lengths so they come out of the engine evenly. They look exactly the same as they pop out. And it's funny because I wasn't gonna use these at all, and now I'm thinking now that they're in, I'm like, maybe they should just be part of the kit. So we might have to negotiate a little bit. It might be a thing. All right, guys, it's been a few days. I've made a lot of progress on the car. So I'm going to take you through that really quick. But before I do that, a couple quick updates. Number one, if you are going to SEMA, I'm thinking about having a meetup there if there are a few people that want to participate. But drop me a DM on Instagram if you are going, and maybe we can link up. Number two, I've added some new shoes to the Blasphemy build. You saw my beautiful wheels that I got last year. The problem was, these cars just don't look good with 17-inch wheels. I thought because of my modern build that I could pull it off, but I just didn't like the proportions. And so Pelican Parts was nice enough to send me these, which are maxi light mini lights. And so they're 15 inch, 15 by 8, 15 by 9. I'm going to powder coat them a different color because I really want the brakes to pop out and of course get some tires, but they seem to fit really well. So I'm pretty excited about that. Now let me walk you through what I've been doing the last few days. I've had a bit of a struggle. I've had a bit of interference that I have not run into in the 2 years of developing this kit. And now I've got to figure out how to solve it. So here's my major issue. This module, which is just this big giant wart, fits on the back of the engine right here. And it has this big honker. I'm interfering with the crossbar. So this bar back here, where both of these shocks mount through, it's interfering on the back underside over there. And of course I didn't run into it on the Blasphemy build because I have that whole custom firewall, that whole part doesn't exist on that car. And for whatever reason, it didn't interfere on Mark's white car. So that's all a bit of a challenge. Maybe the G-body cars are a little bit different back there, but nevertheless, it's an engineering issue and I'm working on it. So quick update, I've got the seat stripped out of the Grey Ghost. I have to remove at least the driver's side pedal, which I'm going to try to do without removing the entire pedal assembly. I've got my pedal board that goes in, and then I've stripped the ECU out of the Blasphemy build, so that should all slide into the Grey Ghost well enough. I've made a bit of a design decision where I'm going to plug this plug on the bottom and relocate one on the front side. I've also decided to put my sensors here, like my flex fuel sensor, my wideband, on this board and kind of locate everything there and clean this whole thing up. Right now I'm also waiting for Send Cut Send to deliver the brand new cradle. And finally I've got my exhaust exactly where I want it. It's sort of sitting on this little platform here. And unfortunately my bandsaw broke, so I couldn't weld my headers up because I couldn't cut anything with them. But basically I've got to connect that header to that exhaust and we should be good to go. All right, so I've spent probably the last 2 hours, first of all, removing my accelerator pedal, which is 2 bolts there. Then I spent the next hour trying to remove this. And the reason why is because I had nylon lock nuts on the inside of the wheel well, and there's really no way for me to hold both. So that was a bit of a pain. I had to use some creative vice gripping. So then finally I got the factory footboard off, and then access to this hole here, which is where the fuel pump wiring needs to go. I had to move under my car so that I could have access to the fuel pump, because that's all part of the ECU. So now that all of that is done, the last thing I need to do is make sure that this hole I have in my firewall is actually big enough for the plugs for the ECU. And the one I'm looking at now, it seems like it's not. So I may end up having to shave this with my belt sander until it's large enough for my plug to fit through. All right, guys, I've actually decided to wrap this video up here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I head to SEMA tomorrow morning, and I want to get this video out to you before I go. Number two, I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming in the mail while I'm at SEMA, including the engine cradle, and there's a bunch of fabrication I get to do in the next video. I've got to weld up the radiators, a new bung on the other side. I've got to weld up the engine cradle, and I've got to enlarge the hole for the ECU wiring harness. After that, it's pretty much just like install and see what happens. So I'm gonna leave it there. If you will be at SEMA, make sure you reach out to me on Instagram. Maybe we can connect while I'm there. All right, you guys keep on rocking. I'll talk to you soon.